Malaysia's food inflation is set to stay on an upward path in the coming months. According to MIDF research, this is due to elevated global commodity prices, domestic supply chain disruptions and depreciation of the ringgit. MIDF research said Malaysia, as a net food importing country, is highly exposed to global shocks in the food supply chain. Food inflation remained elevated, particularly the prices of corn, grain and vegetables. Nevertheless, the research house said overall inflationary pressure will remain stable as the deceleration of fuel inflation will outweigh the rise in food inflation. Assuming the government maintains the current capped fuel prices of RON 95 petrol and diesel. It forecasts that Malaysia's headline inflation to stay below 3.0%, even if food inflation average at 5.0%, while fuel prices are capped at current levels. As a net food importer, what can Malaysia do to ensure it does not face yet another food supply shortage that lead up to a spike in prices? Dr. Shaufiq F. Siddiq, Director of the Institute of Plantation Studies, discusses measures for consideration.
Malaysia is a net food importer, so when there is an increase in global food prices, we experience food inflation in this country. Now, not only that, we do not only import food, we also import inputs for food production. We import fertilizers, almost all, although we have natural gas and we produce our own urea, but the urea that we produce, we export. We import ammonium sulfate. We import muriate of potash. We import phosphorus. We don't have phosphate rock. We don't have muriate of potash here in Malaysia, so we don't have a choice but to import. So these are all inputs that you use in agriculture. And of course, prices will go up.
The government recently removed approved permits AP requirement for Malaysians to import food from abroad. Dr. Shaufiq said the government must remain cautious in removing further APs for certain sectors, amid increasing calls to abolish all APs as requirements to tackle rising food prices.
You remove APs for sectors that we need to protect. Paddy and rice, for example, which the government does not allow free imports until now. I think that's the right move at this point of time. But for poultry, for an example, it is certainly a very short-run solution. It cannot persist in the long run. You cannot allow that to happen in the long run because you want to protect the poultry producers in Malaysia. If you allow cheap imports of cheap cuts, then it's going to be very difficult for them to compete, especially at times of rising cost of production.
Dr. Shaufiq says any measures undertaken to tackle high food prices should prioritize the lower income group, as they spend at least 30% of their money on food.
You have to facilitate trade, make sure that prices are affordable to consumers. You can either subsidize production or provide cash assistance, or what we call transfer payments to consumers. See, the thing is, people who are affected by increase in food prices are the lower income group. They spend almost 30% of their income on food. So when there is an increase in food prices, they are definitely more affected. In the long run, what we need to do is we need to increase efficiency. We have to optimize our resources. And the way to go is to employ modern technology, which is already, stipulated in our latest Dasar Agro Makanan Negara. And this is not the first time we're seeing this. We said that also before. Everybody knows the employment of modern technology enables us to get more using the same amount of inputs.
The Health Ministry has been urged to issue guidelines on monkeypox, including an advisory for those travelling to countries experiencing outbreaks of the virus and to get vaccinated beforehand. Bandar Kuching MP Dr. Kelvin Yee said Putrajaya should also look at ways to intensify control at the country's borders and monitor the entry of travellers from affected countries. So far, the virus has not been reported in Malaysia. He said the public should also be educated on monitoring monkeypox symptoms and whether a quarantine period is needed to prevent local transmission. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization confirmed that there are 92 confirmed cases of monkeypox around the world and another 28 suspected infections. WHO Chief Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus also warned of rising cases of the virus amid increased surveillance of the rare infectious disease around the world. Addressing the UN's World Health Assembly in Geneva, Ghebreyesus described monkeypox as a new formidable challenge to the global community alongside the COVID-19 pandemic and the invasion of Ukraine. So far, countries with confirmed cases of the virus include the US, the UK, Canada, Australia, and at least 9 EU nations. The WHO list did not include Israel, Switzerland, and Austria, which have since confirmed their own cases. The recent monkeypox outbreaks are unusual because they are occurring in countries where the virus is not endemic. The disease is usually found in parts of West and Central Africa. The virus, which was first found in monkeys, can be transmitted from person to person through close physical contact. In other news, over 6,000 cases of hand, foot and mouth disease, HFMD, were reported in the Klang Valley up till the end of last week. This is 14 times the number of cases within the same period last year.
Only 403 cases were reported in the same duration last year. Federal Territory Health Director Dr. Nur Ashah Abu Bakar said her department also saw a 13-fold increase in the number of cases classified as an outbreak, with 408 cases compared to just 32 cases in the same period last year. Cases are classified as an outbreak when there are 2 or more cases in the same incubation period and locality. If children are exhibiting symptoms of HFMD, Dr. Nur Ashah advised parents to refrain from sending them to public places and for kindergarten teachers to always be on the lookout.
Australians not only choose a new government recently, but also a new set of priorities by giving more voice to women, minorities and children issues. Tonight on Consider This, we speak to our guests about politics down under. We'll continue after the break. Stay with us.
Jualan Riang Raya Maxis. Bawa pulang peranti idaman baharu hanya RM50 sebulan dengan Maxis Home Fiber hari ini.
Welcome back. US President Joe Biden announced that 13 countries have joined a new US-led trade initiative on his first trip in office to Asia. Called the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, the initiative is widely seen as a counterweight to China's aggressive expansion in the region. Those joining the trade pact are Malaysia, Australia, Brunei, India, Indonesia, Japan, South Korea, New Zealand, the Philippines, Singapore, Thailand and Vietnam. Along with the United States, they represent 40% of the world's GDP. The countries said in a joint statement that the pact will help them collectively prepare their economies for the future after disruptions from the pandemic and Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Critics say the framework has shortcomings. It doesn't offer incentives to prospective partners by lowering tariffs or provides signatories with greater access to US markets. Those limitations may not make the US framework an attractive alternative to the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which still moved forward after the US bailed out. Meanwhile, Joe Biden said the US military would intervene to defend Taiwan in any attack from China, in what appears to be one of his strongest language yet to deter Beijing from an invasion. Speaking during a press briefing in Tokyo, he said the US stands with other nations to make sure China cannot use force in Taiwan. He added that China is flirting with danger in Taiwan by flying close to the island.
Are you willing to get involved militarily to defend Taiwan if it comes to that?
Yes.
You are?
That's the commitment we made. We support the one China policy. We support all that we've done in the past. But that does not mean that China has the ability, the jurisdiction to go in and use force to take over Taiwan. So we stand firmly with Japan and with other nations not to let that happen. And my expectation is it will not happen. It will not be attempted. My expectation is a lot of it depends upon just how strongly the world makes clear that that kind of action is going to result in long-term disapprobation by the rest of the community.
Meanwhile, Chinese Foreign Ministry in a press briefing expressed strong dissatisfaction and resolute opposition to Biden's remarks. Spokesperson Wang Wenbin said China has no room for compromise on issues involving its core interests, such as sovereignty and territorial integrity. Australia's new Prime Minister was sworn in today and left immediately to an international summit. Anthony Albanese took office after his Labour Party secured support for a working minority government, ending 9 years of Conservative rule. Vote counting is still underway to determine whether he will control a majority in a parliament that is demanding tougher action on climate change.
That there's a new government in Australia, and it's a government that represents a change in terms of the way that we deal with the world on issues like climate change, but also a continuity in the way that we have respect for democracy and the way that we value our friendships and long-term alliances.
Albanese left for Tokyo just hours after a simple swearing-in ceremony to meet the leaders of the so-called Quad nations, the US, India and Japan. Joining him in Japan will be Malaysia-born Penny Wong, the first Australian foreign minister to be born abroad. In Thailand, independent candidate Chachat Situpan won a landslide victory in Bangkok's governor election. This is their first gubernatorial election since 2013. According to unofficial results, Chachat won 1.39 million votes from 2.67 million voters who cast their ballots, or 51.8%, beating a total of 31 candidates. The 55-year-old former transport minister is seen as representing the opponents of the country's military-backed government. Before the gubernatorial election, Chachat was a member of Thailand's biggest opposition party, Thai, but left in 2019. Bangkok last held its governor election on March 3, 2013, before a military coup on May 22, 2014, leading to current Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha's administration seizing power. Over in Pattaya, Paramat Ngampichet of the We Love Pattaya group is set to win Sunday's election for Pattaya City Mayor. Unofficial vote counts show the pro-government candidate is clearly ahead of the three other candidates with 14,349 votes. The official results are expected to be announced by the Election Commission within 30 days. That is all we have for you on AWANI tonight. Thank you for watching. I'm Fahana Sheikh.
Hello and good evening. I'm Melissa Idris.
And I'm Sharad Kudin.
Welcome to Consider This. This is the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. Anthony Albanese has been sworn in as Australia's 31st Prime Minister after his Labour Party defeated Scott Morrison's Liberal National Coalition in the country's federal elections last weekend. The new PM has vowed to take Australia in a new direction with a big shift in climate policy. Joining us now to discuss this further, we have Kian Wong. He's a Malaysian journalist and editor based in Sydney. He was also a former Parliament correspondent for several Australian newspapers. Kian, as we understand it, the vote counting is still going on. That not all the seats have been called because I think the postal votes are still being counted. But what do we know of how the current results will shape federal government formation?
Well, he's going to, the new Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, in whose electorate I live in actually, in the inner city of Sydney.